Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel. And today, well, it's time for me to hand over the crown because my month as YouTuber of the Month has come to an end. Well, it will in a few days time when Sega Zombie finally passes on the mantle to the next lucky winner. And I just want to say thank you very much for all the support each and every one of you has shown the channel, not only over the last month, but since the very beginning of the channel. So, thank you. And to thank you, I thought I'll give you an opportunity to throw some questions my way and I will answer them as honestly as possible. Well, as honestly as I'm willing to answer them anyway. So, if you're looking forward to seeing those questions, some in written form, some even in video form, then just wait until after the titles. Okay, so I thought I'd start answering the questions that came in comment form, and the first one comes from, or the first four I should say, comes from RetroEd UK, and the first question he asks is, has a game's plotline ever been so good that it made you emotional? Happy, sad, angry, whatever? Well, yes, and the obvious answer for me is Final Fantasy VII, and more specifically the plotline leading up to Aeris' death. It's a plotline that has had great impact on me and I will take it to my grave, no doubt about it. Now, secondly, he asks, favourite gaming baddie and why? Well, I'm going back to Final Fantasy VII, no shockers out there for anyone who knows me, and my favourite gaming baddie without a doubt is Sephiroth. Why? Quite simple. Not only is he a great baddie, he's also super cool, looks amazing, and quite frankly, if I was going to be a baddie, Sephiroth would be the one I'd choose. So, third question from RetroEd. What's more important, action playability or plot? Now again, for me this is a simple answer, because action, don't really care too much about, but playability, if a game's not got playability, it's not a game. End of story, regardless of how well crafted the plot is. But for me, it's got to have both. It's got to have great playability and it's got to have a great storyline, and the reason for that is Final Fantasy VII spoiled gaming for me. Well, I say spoiled gaming, it actually spoiled me, because obviously once you play a game as fantastic as Final Fantasy VII, then you can't look back. You can't just go back to play okay gameplay on okay graphics but no story. For me, I need both. Give me the story and give me the gameplay. Now, the fourth question he asks. How the heck did you get so awesome at creative editing? I'm jealous of your skills. Smiley face. Well, the simple answer to that is, well, I don't think I am that good. I just employ a lot of smoke and mirrors and simple tricks just to make things look a little bit interesting. So, I hope that answers your questions, RetroEd. Now, moving on, we're going to our fellow Scott. So, Stewie's Retro Gaming asked me, quite simply, if it's the late 80s, early 90s, you're given the keys to a large shop located in the heart of the town centre, you decide an arcade is the way to go, what machines are we expected once those shutters go up on the first day? So for me, there's obviously going to be all the classics. You're going to have Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Defender. You will also have Hard Driving, because I loved that game. Don't know why I loved it, but I loved it. We'll also have Dragon's Lair, and what else? There's just so many to choose from. But I think I would have to make one little cheat, and I would have to go probably a little bit further in the future, because you see, the good lady, she would go absolutely mental if I didn't include Star Wars Pod Racing, because she absolutely loves that game and it would need to be in there. Maybe in a little back room all by itself so it didn't spoil the aesthetic of the late 80s or the 80s and early 90s games, but it would definitely be in there. Okay, let's move on to David. And David asks about what game from my childhood do I keep going back to. So this is a moment that you're all glad that when Final Fantasy VII came out, I was, well, 24 years of age, so I can't really claim that as going back to my childhood. So of course, going back to my childhood, you're looking at the late 70s and the 80s. So the games are going to be 8-bit micro games. And one of the games from back then that I was very passionate about at the time and I still love to the day is Orbiter. Now, it was just a simple clone of Defender on the ZX Spectrum. I never got any good at it, but I could play it for hours on end and still dip back into it now and again. So let's move on to the next question, which comes from Retro Red Steve, and he asks, what's my favourite Master System game? Now I don't have a great deal of nostalgia for the Master System because, well, I was on the 8-bit micros at the time, but there is one game that I did play at the time and I can still go back to from time to time, despite how difficult it is, and that is Phantasy Star. No shocks there that it's an RPG, but there you go, that's my answer to that question. So let's move on to the final of the comment questions, which comes from Drink and Games with Josh, and he asks, firstly, how much did that badass watch cost? Well, I don't know, I'm going to answer that straight away because it was a Christmas gift, so I don't know. Anyway, but his serious question, apparently serious question, is, have you had any training on video editing production? Your production value is fantastic and has even got better lately. Well, I think he sort of answers the question for himself when he says, has even got better lately. You see, this video editing that a lot of people out there seem to enjoy from my little channel is something completely or almost completely new to me. Now, I do have a degree in media theory and production, and I do have a higher national diploma in communication and media. But back when I was in university and college, well, that was the 90s, so as you can imagine, there was no digital, that was all theory to us. So I've just purely decided I want to learn this skill and have been doing it as I go along. I'm glad a lot of you out there appreciate it, and you know what? If anyone wants me to put out a video on how I edit and how I learn to edit, then just hit me up in the comments and I might put a video together for that. So that's all the comment questions out the way. So now we're going to move on to the part that I've really enjoyed, and that is the questions that have been sent to me in the form of a video. And to start with, I'm going to let Spielkind RC take it away.
Hi Generation Pixel, and congratulations to your awesome 200 subs plus milestone. So you wanted some questions then. Here you go. As a YouTuber, I would like to know, do you write full fleshed out scripts for your videos? And as a gamer, I would like to know, how's your gaming ratio between modern and retro games? And as a little bonus round, why did you change your awesome gaming corner in the background in favor of this green screen in your videos? So I hope that weren't too many questions. Feel free just to use one of them, of course. And thanks for the invitation, and have a great Q&A. Keep on gaming. Chris out.
Hey. So thank you for those questions, Chris, and I'll answer them as best I can. Now, the first question you asked was, do I write full-fledged scripts? And the first thing I'm going to ask you is, do you watch my videos? Because no, I don't. It's something that I might do in the future, but at the moment I tend just to wake up in the morning, have an idea of what I'd like to talk about, sit in front of the camera, talk for ages, and then have to edit. Another reason I go into editing quite deeply is because it's a great way to patch and fix things when you make mistakes and don't script. So no scripts. Now, your second question is, what is my ratio between retro gaming and modern gaming? And I would say it's very good, because during the course of a day, while I've got time to game, I will bounce back and forward between modern and retro on different systems as well, from the PC right through to the 8-bit micros and of course the PlayStation 5. Now, I do tend only to play one modern game at a time because they tend to be long and quite complex and involved. But while I take a break from that, I will bounce straight onto another system, a retro system if you will, and play something that's just a bit more dip in and play. So yes, I'll play, I would say, more than 50-50 towards the retro, but invest a lot of time in the modern games. So I think I've got a nice healthy balance when it comes to that. Now, finally, you asked, why did I change from my awesome gaming wall background to my green screen? Well, now there's two reasons for this. The first one is that when I started this channel, I knew I was going to start collecting again for the umpteenth time, but this time I'm probably going to remain collecting and not finally get rid of it and restart again. So it's a work in progress, that wall. Secondly, this green screen behind me is so much easier to dust. It takes way less time just to tidy it up and get to shooting. So I hope that answers your questions, Chris, and I'm now going to hand you over to Paul, better known as Retrobait.
Hi Generation Pixel, Paul here from Retrobait. I'm up in the shed in Inverness, and firstly I just want to congratulate you on making 200 subscribers, mate. It's a brilliant achievement. I was there not so long ago myself. I was absolutely buzzing when I got to that milestone as well. Secondly, I must say congratulations on winning YouTuber of the Month, and more importantly bringing it home to beautiful Scotland. So well done on that one, mate. My question to you is this. My nostalgia always goes back to music that's been played in games. So Generation Pixel, Stuart, what is your most nostalgic gaming music? Catch you later, dude. Bye bye.
Now that's an interesting question, Paul, because like you and me, we're slightly older gamers, so our nostalgia window sort of goes back to the 80s, where music often wasn't great or wasn't even achievable. So most of my favourite music definitely comes from the 90s when we're talking about gaming, but that's not quite nostalgia, I mean. But there is one track, or at least one piece of music in particular that I'm quite fond of, and that is the Robocop music, and you'll hear it in many of my videos, and I'm sure you'll love that one too. So you know what, let's just play that for a bit. Now for my next question, this comes from way over the pond in the United States, and that comes from Davis Deadly.
What's up, Generation Pixel? Congrats on the growth of your channel. I can't wait for you to get that 1,000 subscriber mark. You're going to be hitting it in no time. But my question for you is, what is your commute like to go pick up some retro games or to go to your local game store? Is it local? Here in the States, everything is smushed together. Me being on the East Coast of the States too, everything is relatively smushed together. So when I imagine you going to pick up a game, this is what I see in my head. Is it like that? Are you like trying to drive over sheep and everything's in, like, you have to go like miles and miles in this little tiny Volkswagen, whatever you guys drive over there? So am I right on the money with that? Or if you can just let us know, what is it like hunting down games over in Scotland? Congratulations again. Until next time, peace.
Well, Mr. Deadly, to be honest with you, back in the day, perhaps it might look like that, because you see, I originally come from a small town by the name of Kilmarnock, famous for Johnny Walker whiskey, just in case you want to get a sort of handle on where I come from. But for the last 20 years, I have lived in Glasgow, a large metropolitan city that you might know about, and just to show you how exactly I would go and get some games here in Glasgow, here's some video footage of my own. Next up, I'm going to pass you over to Mark, or you might better know him as Geordie Slasher Gaming.
Alright, Stuart, massive congratulations on the 200 subs and the YouTuber of the Month. Well deserved them both, mate. Really nice guy, love the channel and all that jazz. Now, you wanted some questions asked, so here we go. First question, is that your natural hair colour? And if it's not, did you go all the way? Next question, I know you're a massive Final Fantasy fan. We've had Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was fantastic. But which other Final Fantasy game would you like to see remade in the same mould, if possible? And last question, now Scotland is one of the greatest countries in the world. Absolutely beautiful. The people are funny, they're good bunch of good crack, aren't they? Now, as a jock, as a Scotsman, what are you most proud of coming from Scotland, or what have you? Anyway, That's my 3 questions. Congratulations once again, mate. Keep it up, and I'll catch you later.
Well, Mark, thank you for those 3 wonderful questions, and to answer the first one, no, unfortunately the hair is not natural. I do have to get it done on a regular basis. And as for going all the way, well, that's something that's between me and myself. Now, secondly, back onto a gaming question, thank goodness, and he asked what Final Fantasy game I would have remade, like in the vein of the Final Fantasy VII remake. And that is a really simple question for me to answer, and it would be Final Fantasy VIII. And the reason for that is Final Fantasy VIII needs a remake, just plain and simple. Now, I'm sure there's another question coming up that might cover this, so I won't go too deep into it, but yes, Final Fantasy VIII needs a remake in the same vein as we had Final Fantasy VII. Now, what as a Scot makes me most proud of being a Scot? Well, let's just have a look at this. So as you can see, the Scots are just plain and simply the best nation in the world. Thanks. Anyway, let's move on to the next question, and it's coming from Andy, one of 3 Andys, and I'm going to have the Andys back to back, a hat trick of Andys. And the first one is from Andy at UK Kraut Gaming.
Hello everybody, UK Kraut here, and I would just like to congratulate the fantastic Generation Pixel guys. Wow, what a fantastic achievement to win YouTuber of the Month. I tell you what, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. Stuart, you are a flipping star, mate. Yeah, it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. And double claps, guys. He reached 200 subs. That is fantastic, and I'm sure it's over 200 now anyway. But absolutely fantastic milestone, fella. Absolutely blinding. But yes, I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Generation Pixel. What did you find the hardest thing setting up your YouTube channel? Which certain thing was the most driving you insane thing about setting up a YouTube channel? I hope you don't mind me asking you that. See you soon. Bye.
Well, thank you, Mr. UK Kraut Gaming, for all those kind words and of course the question. And the answer to that question for me is it's not going to be a technical thing. It's not going to be about equipment or scripting, which I don't do anyway. But the thing that really I struggled with was sitting down to do the first video. And I think that's common amongst most creators. But when you do, and this is the only advice I could give anyone out there thinking about doing their own channel, is just sit down and do that first one exactly as you want to do it. Post it, get it over with, and move on to the next. And that's the best answer I could give for that. So, thanks for the question. And now let's move on to the second Andy. And we're going back across the pond to the fabulous Andy, who is better known as Pacmancase.
What is up, everybody? Pacmancase. I've got a question for Generation Pixel. That's the best Scottish accent I could come up with. I normally have to get into the mood, like, I'm a wee little Irishman, or I'm fucking Scottish. Like, that's the best I got. So please don't disown me. I've got a question for you, though, my blue-haired friend. That question is, what game franchise do you absolutely hate that they keep making stuff for? What game franchise did maybe you love, but now you're completely over it? They need to put a fork in it. That steak is done. They've squeezed out all the juices that are left, and we're just annoyed now that they keep popping stuff out. I want to know. Let me know from across the pond. I'll talk to you later, and I will be awaiting your answer, good sir. Peace.
Thank you very much for that question, Andy, because it's quite a difficult one. As most gamers know, a lot of franchises start off really strong, but the problem is, the bigger they are at the beginning, the more that companies want to squeeze every last red cent out of those games and make as much money as possible, which you can understand from a business point of view, but from a fan point of view, we kind of want the games that we love to be left alone and not tarnished in the future. Now, for me, it's going to be the sports games. and more specifically the FIFA games, the soccer or football games, because although I don't play them much, especially not nowadays, back in the day, especially back in the mid-90s, they were great games to play head to head with your friends on, a Friday and Saturday evening. But what they do now with EA is they release the same game over and over again. They expect the fans of the series just to buy a full price game every year, when all they're doing is updating a few players and a few stats. Now, I did have a brief flirt with the FIFA games. It was FIFA 17, 18 and 19, and that's because they introduced a small role-playing element into the games. Yes, that's right, I managed to find RPG in a sports game, but unfortunately they don't do that anymore. So yeah, the sports games, if they're going to keep releasing new stuff every year, make it be a patch, a download for the new players or the changes of teams, and stop milking your fans. So thank you for that question, Andy, and let's move on to Andy number 3, who's also across the pond.
How's it going, Stuart? Generation Pixel. Got a question for you. And this one, I think, is a pretty good one. What hardware or software would you recommend to any content creator? I think that's my question. And pardon my eyes, because the pollen here in North Carolina is over 9,000. Hope you're well, bud.
Well, BrewUnited, that is quite an interesting question, but it's one that I'm going to answer fairly easily. Now, I could go on for hours and hours about different softwares and different pieces of hardware and tech, but you've asked for one piece that I would recommend to all people doing a channel, and for me is get yourself a phone, a decent phone, the best phone that you can get, because this phone here, the phones that we have these days have decent cameras, they have decent microphones, and of course you can download many different apps for editing, and of course you can upload to YouTube and watch YouTube on them. It's all in one package. So anyone out there who doesn't have a channel and is thinking about a channel, don't worry too much about cameras or lighting or editing software. Get yourself the best phone that you can possibly get for whatever budget you have. And trust me, the modern phones, even phones coming from 2015 and beyond, which are reasonable prices just now, do a fantastic job, especially for starting your channel. If you however want to progress, then you can start looking at the other stuff. But yeah, without a doubt, a decent phone, because it's also mobile. You can get out and about, you can shoot yourself in your own home setting, or you can shoot some video footage out and about. So yeah, get yourself a decent phone. So thank you for that question, and let's move on to our next one, and we're coming back over to good old Blighty, and I'm going to pass you on to Ginger Hippy Gaming, or Sai.
First of all, congratulations to Generation Pixel on your 200 subs. Way past that now, and I know you're going to go really far. You really are. So I've got two questions for you. First one, are there any RPGs that you absolutely hate? Just don't like at all. And the second one is the important question. Biscuits, are you a dunker or not a dunker?
Thank you very much for those questions, Sai, and I'm going to answer the gaming question first. And the RPG that I really don't like is Final Fantasy VIII. Now, the reason I don't like it is you got penalised for grinding in that game. In other words, the more you powered up your own character, the more powerful the enemies became. Now, that might sound like what normal gaming, but to RPG players, especially JRPG players, the love of the game was to go out and grind for a couple of hours, so if you did face an impressive boss at the end of the level, you could easily waltz through them if you had invested the time in training or upgrading your character. Now, that doesn't mean to say that I'm not going to go back and play it fully again. I will, but as I said in the previous question, I'd love for them to do a remake in the same vein as they did with Final Fantasy VII, just so I could play the storyline without being so annoyed at the penalisation for grinding in what is essentially a game that you're encouraged to grind in. So, next question. Do I dunk or do I not dunk? Well, I'm a normal, decent human being, Si, and of course that means I dunk. Who wouldn't? So for the very last question in this Q&A, we're going to a country that hasn't asked a question yet, and that country is Canada, or as I like to call it, Far West Scotland. And who's asking the question, I hear you ask? Well, it's none other than the Posh and Becks of the YouTube gaming world, and that is the Retro Rivals.
Hey Generation Pixel, congrats on your YouTuber of the Month win and also on your 200 subscribers. Yeah, that's great. As fellow alums of YouTuber of the Month, we would like to ask you a question for your channel.
Yes, Jen's let me ask this question.
Yeah.
So my question is, if you could pick one game from any console that you would add to your collection, what would it be? But the only thing is, it has to be a game that you're going to play. It's not going to be a sealed copy of something high-end price game that you'll never open or afraid to touch. What game would you add to your collection?
If money wasn't an object.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something, like Scott said, that you would definitely play.
That you have to play, yeah.
Yep. Thanks so much for asking us to be part of this, and we can't wait to hear your response.
So thank you very much for that question, Scott and Jen. And to answer it, well, I came up with one. Now, it's probably not a game that many people think of when they're thinking of the one game they must have regardless of money, and it's a PlayStation 2 game by the name of Rule of Rose. Now, I'm sure a few of you out there are thinking, well, Rule of Rose is fairly easy to pick up, and as prices go, it's not one of the top tier heavy hitter prices, but the particular version that I'm looking for, or would want to add to my collection anyway, is the UK release. You see, you can buy the NTSC version or the Italian version or French version for about £350 to £500, which is pricey for a game, I will admit. But the UK version was banned almost instantly, so it's almost mythical in its status, and finding one is almost like finding the end of a rainbow. Actually, you could probably find the end of a rainbow more easily than you could find a UK version of Rule of Rose, and the price of course reflects that. Sorry for having to break into the outro just part way through, but I managed to forget one question, and a very important question. So now I'm going to quickly hand you over to Lee, the nerdy geezer.
Right, here's my question. Do you like deep fried Mars bars?
Well, Lee, I'll let you into a secret here. The deep fried Mars bar thing is just something we tell tourists just for a laugh to see if they'll try one. So, there's your answer. Anyway, that's the last of the questions, and I'll be quite frankly honest, I'm getting knackered, as we say in Scotland. So thank you very much for all the time you took and all the effort you took into sending questions my way. Thank you for all the kind words, and thanks to everyone who watches and supports the channel. Now, anything you want to ask in the future or just now, just pop down in the comments, because I'm always here to chat. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and cheerio.